Tonight, a new indictment and an arrest warrant.
The allegation, an incitement of violence against the president.
The man accused of trying to assassinate President Donald Trump is in court again today.
No bail and no release for Cole Allen, the man charged with attempting to assassinate President Trump Saturday night.
A former FBI director accused of threatening to kill the president as the alleged Correspondents' Dinner gunman faces court.
And we're going to look at the landmark Supreme Court case that critics say strips minorities of their democratic rights. Finally, some juicy law we can sink our teeth into. Yeah! But first,
even though last week's White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting happened in front of security cameras, multiple Secret Service agents, and within metres of literally hundreds of reporters, there has been intense speculation this week about what exactly happened, and not just among the tin-foil hat-wearing communities of the internet. Democratic member of Congress Jasmine Crockett posting on social media, maybe it's fake. There was plenty of online chatter as well, suggesting the shooting had been staged. Evidence was flimsy at best, although this clip from Fox News reporter Aisha Hansey reporting from the scene about a warning she got from the husband of White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was more than enough proof for some.
Right as the dinner was starting, the national anthem happened, and then he kind of leaned over and said, I watched you on TV, you do a great job. You need to be very safe. And he was just very serious when he said that to me. And he kind of looked around the room and he said, there are some
what? The call was cut off. Was she being hushed up? Well, as it turns out, no. As Hansey later explained, mobile phone reception was pretty bad in that basement ballroom, and the call dropped out. As she was about to say, Leavitt's husband, Nicholas Riccio, was telling her to be careful with her own safety because, quote, the world is crazy. I think we'd all agree on that, Chaz.
yeah, I gotta say, John, I'm not sure these conspiracy theorists have thought this one completely through.
You think?
Yeah, I do. I mean, do they really think if the attack was staged that the press secretary's husband would have known about it beforehand? Why would you even tell the press secretary, let alone the press secretary's husband? And if he did know it was staged, why would he tell a Fox News journalist beforehand? And if you did tell her, why wouldn't she report it immediately? Sounds a bit like news to me, John. But let's say she did decide for some reason to only report it afterwards, but her line was cut out mysteriously. Why wouldn't she just tweet something out? Reporters do that, None of this theory makes sense. Yet according to the New York Times, more than 300,000 posts containing the word staged were shared on Twitter before midday the next day. People, for instance, were speculating that Trump faked the attack to convince the public to let him build his ballroom. To build the ballroom, John, he just needs to ask Congress.
Yep.
They're Republican. It's very easy. There's no need for a grand conspiracy. And besides, if you wanted to stage a colossal false flag attack, why would you do it under the noses of 1,000 reporters? And why would you make it so lame? I mean, look at this newly released footage. This guy literally just runs through security. That's it. That's his whole plan. He got about 5 meters before they stopped him. Not exactly a spectacular threat, which is why only a week later, everyone's kind of already moved on. By contrast, a totally run-of-the-mill assassination attempt, no conspiracy, it requires no magical explanation because they're becoming standard practice. General political violence attacks and plots doubled in 2025 compared to any previous year over the last 3 decades. And as far as assassination attempts go, they're becoming distressingly common. Trump has now survived 17 assassination attempts. Obama has survived 13, and then it drops right off. There has never been anything like this frequency of assassination attempts before in American history over the last decade or so. Sadly, John, one more attempt is anything but a surprise.
No, indeed it's not, but the questions haven't ended there. There are also questions being asked over whether the Secret Service agent shot in his bulletproof vest was in fact hit by gunman Cole Allen, or was he hit by a fellow officer? The official criminal complaint fueled this friendly fire theory when it described the offences this way: attempting to assassinate the president, transportation of a firearm and discharge of a firearm, but nothing about that discharge of a firearm hitting anyone. There was no charge about that. And the Washington Post then examined higher resolution security footage, and they concluded there is no indication in that footage that Allen fired his weapon, noting no obvious flash from the muzzle of the shotgun before the suspect runs out of the frame. Secret Service Director Sean Curran told Fox News that the agent who was shot was the only person on the scene to fire their weapon apart from the would-be assassin.
The suspect shot our officer point-blank range with a shotgun. Our officer heroically returned fire while being shot point-blank range in the chest with a shotgun. It was able to get off 5 shots. It's great training. The officer just acted heroically.
So the officer who was shot at the would-be assassin. President Trump was asked about all of that.
Well, they say it was not friendly fire.
So you're hearing that it's wrong?
Well, that's what I heard. I mean, I heard that. They said it wasn't friendly fire.
Okay.
It was actually reported.
And at the same press availability, Trump was also asked about his personal security in light of this latest assassination attempt.
Is there talks about you potentially wearing a bulletproof vest moving forward, given you have now been shot at?
I don't know if I can handle looking 20 pounds heavier.
Rare moment of self-deprecating humour from President Trump. But of course, many questions do remain unanswered. Principally, how was the gunman able to get so close or even get to be in that hotel at all, Chaz?
Well, we do at least know how he got into the hotel. Usually when lots of important officials gather in the one place, DHS puts the Secret Service in charge of coordinating all the security. It's called a National Special Security Event, but there was no such designation for the White House Correspondents Association's dinner, so that was strange to begin with. It meant the Secret Service simply considered their turf to be the ballroom and the immediate perimeter around the ballroom. The DC police handled the outside area with road closures and traffic control, but in between those two zones, there was no clear responsibility for the security of the dinner guests or the rest of the hotel. Apparently, they did screen the hotel guests, well, someone did, but the shooter had no criminal record, so he would have passed any screening anyway. Even though the Secret Service security had its own issues, we saw on the video of the incident that a police dog lingered at one of the doors for about 3 seconds before the attack, but then it was tugged away by its handler. The dog then pauses and went back to the doorway, quite interested. Once again, it was pulled back, and immediately after the dog and its handler walked away, Allen was seen sprinting through that doorway, shotgun in hand. So that was a bit of a stuff-up as well. Got to listen to Fido. But to be fair, even with those screw-ups, the guy really didn't get very close. If we look at the map, Allen started running through security there and was taken out here. So he didn't even get to the stairs going downward, which were there. But if a shooter had got down those stairs, there was more security at that door. And then Trump was actually all the way on the other side of that massive hall if he got through those doors. So he really wasn't within cooee of hurting the president for real. So room for improvement, yes, but we probably shouldn't get carried away about the security situation.
No, indeed not. It is probably no coincidence, though, that just days after the Washington Hilton shooting, former FBI Director James Comey was formally charged with threatening to kill the president. Remember this cryptic photo of seashells arranged on a beach that Comey posted on social media last year? Donald Trump's Justice Department sure does.
The Justice Department has indicted former FBI Director James Comey for a second time. Mr. Comey first faced federal indictment last September when he was accused of lying to Congress over leaks to the press, but a judge dismissed that case later that year.
Of course, there's a long history between Trump and Comey. You'll remember that Trump fired James Comey just 4 months into his first term in 2017 after it was revealed that the FBI was investigating the Trump campaign's links to Russia. That first legal case against James Comey last year was based on a seemingly tenuous charge of making a false statement to Congress about FBI leaks, which legal experts described at the time as exceptionally weak. That case never even made it to trial. It was dismissed when the judge found that the appointment of the interim US attorney who indicted Comey, Lindsay Halligan, was invalid and unlawful. Now, US Attorney W. Ellis Boyle has secured a second indictment of James Comey over the seashells.
We take all threat cases seriously and prosecute anyone who violates federal law, regardless of title or status.
And Boyle's boss, acting US Attorney General Todd Blanche, who, like Lindsay Halligan, is one of Donald Trump's former personal lawyers, now wants Comey behind bars for 20 years, claiming
he knowingly and willfully making a threat to take the life of and to inflict bodily harm upon the President of the United States.
So, did Comey really threaten to kill Donald Trump? For all we know, those numbers could be somebody's PIN number, but 47 also could refer to President Donald Trump. He is the 47th President of the United States, while 86 is a slang term. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, to 86 someone can be parlance to refuse to serve a customer or eject or ban them. They note that recently it has also gained the meaning of to kill, but that's not in the actual definition due to its, quote, relative recency and sparseness of use. Sparse or not, President Trump says that's exactly what James Comey was saying, although his source isn't quite Merriam-Webster.
It's a mob term for kill 'em, you know? You ever see the movies? 86 'em. The mobster says to one of his wonderful associates, 86 'em. That means kill 'em. It's, I think of it as a mob term. I don't know, people think of it as something having to do with disappearing, but the mob uses that term to say when they want to kill somebody, they say, 86, the son of a gun.
Yeah, they also call each other sons of guns in mob movies. Trump didn't say which actual mob movie he had in mind. A year ago, James Comey did explain to late-night Stephen Colbert how he came to post that original image.
My wife and I, Patrice, were walking on the beach and saw those numbers in shells on the beach. And
you didn't do this, somebody else did this.
Yeah, somebody else did it. We were on a walk preparing for this week, the rollout of my book.
Yep.
She looked at it and said, why'd someone put their address in the sand?
All right.
And then we stood at it, trying to figure, looked at it, trying to figure out what it was. And she'd long been a server in restaurants. And she said, you know what I think it is?
Yeah.
I think it's a reference to restaurants when you would 86 something in a restaurant.
Right, it's off the menu.
Yeah. I said, no, I remember when I was a kid, you'd say 86 to get out of a place. This place stinks, let's 86 it.
Right. I was a bartender. You would 86 a customer if they were getting drunk. Like, let's 86 them. Let's, like, give them a low-proof alcohol, something like that. Yeah.
And so I said, I think it's a clever political message. And she said, you should take a picture of it. I said, sure. And then she said, you should Instagram that. And boom.
Whatever it was meant to mean, Comey took that image down on the very day that he posted it. He was interviewed by the US Secret Service, and it seemed like the matter might have ended there. The case was reportedly on the back burner, but shifted into overdrive earlier this month after President Trump fired Attorney General Pam Bondi and named Todd Blanche as her acting replacement. Seems like Todd Blanche thinks that this could land him the job on a more permanent basis, but experts say this indictment fails to provide evidence that the former FBI director intended his social media message as a genuine threat to the president. US courts have repeatedly recognised that even seemingly threatening language can constitute legally protected political expression, so it'll now be up to a jury to decide what Jim Comey's intent really was, if the judge lets it get that far. But in the meantime, there's little doubt over the intent of some others on social media this week, posting images like this one. I think that's fairly clear, Chess.
Yeah, no disputing that one. I would say, though, it is extremely unlikely this will get to a trial, John. To succeed, prosecutors are going to need to be able to prove somehow that a reasonable recipient who is familiar with the circumstances would interpret that seashell pic of Comey's as a serious expression of an intent to do harm to the President of the United States. Not that it could possibly be interpreted that way, or that's a little ambiguous and it might be interpreted that way, but that a reasonable person would interpret those seashells as a genuine threat against the President's life. Now, Trump says there's only one clear definition of the term to 86. John played you a clip before, but he didn't just say it. He put in writing as well, saying 86 is a mob term for kill him. They say 86 him. 8647 means kill President Trump. 8 miles out, 6 feet down. Now, I've never heard of the phrase 8 miles out, 6 feet down before, but according to Trump, every reasonable person would definitely think of that mysterious phrase when they hear the term 86. Well, Snopes didn't think of that. In an article written well before this controversy occurred, Snopes argued the most likely derivation of the phrase to 86 was rhyming slang for the word nix, which means to forbid, refuse, or veto. So now we've got two neutral sources that disagree with Trump about the meaning of that term, Snopes and Merriam-Webster, which John mentioned before. Hey, why don't we make it 3 sources? Let's throw in the Oxford Dictionary as well. They also define 86 to mean to eject or debar a person from premises, to reject or abandon, or to refuse to serve a customer. So prosecutors need to prove that no reasonable person would have the same definition of 86 as 2 different dictionaries did, and at least 1 major fact-check site. Fine. Maybe in mob world, they have their own specific definition. Let's ask a mob prosecutor.
Never, ever, not once did I hear any real-world gangster use the term 86 to refer to a murder or anything. And God knows these guys had colorful lingo, but never that phrase 86. I don't know where the president's getting this from. He said from some movie. They don't use that term in Godfather or Sopranos or Goodfellas, maybe some way old-timey movie, but that's not reality.
Okay, so the Trump definition is not from the mob, and not even from mob movies of the last half a century or so. And by the way, in over 5 days, no one's found one single movie where the term 86 is used to mean to kill someone. And trust me, Republicans are looking for those movies. Fine. Maybe it's something that just Republicans mean when they say 86. Except it's not, because back in 2024, Republican House member Matt Gaetz tweeted out, "We've now 86'd Kevin McCarthy, Ronna McDaniel, and Mitch McConnell." I'm pretty sure none of those people have been brutally murdered by Matt Gaetz, so clearly that meant to get sacked, not to kill. And by the way, this is all academic because it doesn't matter what the mob or Republicans or any group in particular think the phrase means. If any reasonable person, any non-specific person would think there is doubt about the meaning of 8647, then this prosecution's going down. And to that end, I call as my first witness Donald Trump.
But do you really think your life was in danger?
Probably, I don't know. You know, based on what I'm seeing out there, yeah, the people like Comey have created tremendous danger, I think, for politicians and others.
Probably, I don't know. And then he says Comey has endangered other people's lives, but that's not the question, is it? The question is, was he definitely communicating with seashells that he was going to kill the president? And the answer was, probably, I don't know.
Probably, I don't know, right there, that's an acquittal. Because prosecutors have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the victim believed that his life was in jeopardy. And if the jury comes back at probably, I don't know, that's a not guilty right there. I thought that was a really important moment.
And by the way, John, this is all simply arguing about the meaning of the term 86. We haven't even gotten to the bit yet where they are trying to prove that the way James Comey supposedly wanted to seriously and unambiguously convey a threat against Trump's life was through a seashell pic that Comey removed the moment people suggested it could be seen as threatening. And he replaced it with this apology here. "I didn't realise some folks associate those numbers with violence. It never occurred to me, but I oppose violence of any kind, so I took the post down." Now, what kind of knowing and willful threat is that? And by the way, if it was a serious threat, what's the FBI been doing for the last year, leaving this deadly ex-FBI director loose on the streets for the last 12 months, endangering the president's life? This case is not only going to be dismissed before it gets to a trial, John, but Comey is likely going to be awarded costs and possibly extra damages for a vindictive prosecution. This here, This is bad.
It's good to see you finally using that law degree of yours. Licciardello for the defence. Now to another story that also hinges on legal questions around intent. The landmark 1965 Voting Rights Act tried to guarantee minority groups were represented in Congress by allowing states to selectively draw electoral boundaries to ensure a proportion contained a majority of minority voters. So, in very simple terms, if the majority of voters in a particular district are black, they'll tend to elect somebody to Congress who understands and represents their concerns, and often that will be a black candidate as well. And as a result, unlike back in 1965, the racial mix of the US House of Representatives today pretty much reflects that of the wider electorate. And partisan politics also plays a big part in this, because while Republicans attract more white voters by a margin of 15 percentage points, Democrats dominate among minority voters, leading among Hispanic voters by 26 points, Asian voters by 28 points, and black voters by an overwhelming 71 percentage points. So, congressional districts that are drawn in a way where minority groups are the majority tend to support Democratic candidates of whatever colour. But now, the Supreme Court's conservative majority has found Louisiana redrawing their electoral map to include a second majority-minority district was an unconstitutional racial gerrymander, and that Article 2 of that Voting Rights Act from 1965 only applies when the evidence supports a strong inference that the state intentionally drew its districts to afford minority voters less opportunity because of their race. So that's where intent comes in. It's no longer enough to show that a map is unconstitutional because minority voters have suddenly become a minority in every district, or the number of minority representatives in Congress is suddenly falling. You have to prove that that was the intention.
Yeah, I should also explain why this ruling is controversial from a legal point of view. The law again. The original Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act never explicitly mentioned drawing district boundaries. It simply said no voting qualifications or prerequisite to voting, or standard practice or procedure, shall deny or abridge the right of any citizen in the United States to vote on account of race or colour. Now, that was interpreted to mean that you can't draw district boundaries to reduce the representation of black people. You might think that interpretation is wrong. Justice Clarence Thomas thinks it's wrong, but pretty much every legal authority in the past has disagreed with Justice Thomas, including the Supreme Court majority this week. But in 1980, the Supreme Court did make a small tweak to that standard interpretation of the law. They ruled that to challenge district boundaries as racially discriminatory, you had to prove that people who drew those lines had intended to discriminate, which is hard to prove unless those line drawers record a Dr. Evil-like confession. So in 1982, Congress clarified things a bit, and they amended Section 2 to only require proof of discriminatory results, not intent. So Congress made it very clear that if 25% of the state is black, then around 25% of the seats should be drawn to allow black representation. It doesn't matter whether the people drawing the lines are racist or not. All that matters is the results. Now, you can disagree with that, but Ronald Reagan signed that bill. And that's exactly what Congress decided. They were very explicit about it. But now the Supreme Court has decided they know better. They're not supposed to do that, John. That's controversial. Now, to be fair, Justice Alito denies that his opinion effectively repeals that 1982 law. He says his ruling doesn't require a finding of intentional discrimination in order to challenge district lines. It only requires you to show a strong inference that intentional discrimination occurred. Now, to me, those two tests sound kind of identical. And that's what it sounded like to Justice Kagan as well, who wrote in dissent, the majority claims only to be updating our Section 2 law as though through a few technical tweaks, but in fact, those updates eviscerate the law. So what does this mean in the real world? Well, for 2026, it's too late to redraw boundaries in a number of states, but in Louisiana, they're going to gerrymander at least one, maybe two more seats for Republicans. Florida has already gerrymandered 4 more seats for Republicans just this week, so that will keep. And Trump's been working on Tennessee as well, saying he's already talked to the governor, and all the other political representatives of Tennessee have promised to gerrymander as well. That should gain Republicans 1 extra seat. So we're talking 2 to 3 seats, probably not going to make a huge difference in 2026. But by 2028, the Republicans could possibly gain 10 extra seats in Congress from this decision, and there could be 20 to 25% fewer black representatives in the House. Now, we really don't know for sure what's going to happen, though. This is all speculation. So why don't we ask an expert?
Excellent suggestion, Chaz. For more, I did speak to Jessica Huseman. She's an elections expert and editorial director at the nonpartisan voting news website, Votebeat. Jessica Huseman, welcome to Planet America. Can you explain to us why you think this case matters so much and what impact it's likely to have?
It's going to be hard to gauge right now what its impact is going to be on November because we don't really know what state legislators are going to do with this information. I suppose we will find out in the coming weeks. November is getting closer, and so I think the likelihood that any national or that any state legislator decides to take this and run with it is limited by time, most specifically. But I think the importance of the ruling can't really be overstated. So I'm not sure how familiar your listeners are with the civil rights era in American history in the 1960s, but it was a chaotic time, and out of it came the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which is what is at issue here, specifically Section 2. And what Section 2 has meant for us for the longest time is that if maps have a discriminatory effect, they can be challenged in court. So you don't necessarily have to prove that the maps were intended to be racist, but if they have a racist effect, then that's something that the courts have looked pretty askance at over the last several decades. The Supreme Court ruling just this week said, no, that's not how we're going to look at it anymore. You have to prove that there is a specific racist intent when the law was being crafted in order for us to consider race as a factor in the fairness of the maps. And so if that intent is missing, then you can't challenge the maps. And so that has a lot of implications, but it does really impact the way that advocates here are going to proceed challenging civil rights cases related to voting.
Jessica, we now know that intent has become key in proving racist intent in redistricting rather than in outcomes. Do you have any idea how anyone can prove that intent?
That's a really good question, and the answer is that it's very hard to prove, right? I think the people passing these laws and writing these laws and talking about them are not emailing each other back and forth saying, hey, let's do this because it's racist, or let's do this because it might hurt Black people. Like, that's not obviously what they're saying when they advocate these laws. They have other reasons, right? They're partisan. They benefit Democrats. They benefit a certain voting population or a certain neighborhood, irrespective of race. It just happens to be that racial minority who lives in that area or who votes the way that we don't appreciate. And so it is very difficult to prove intent. There have been isolated events in which you can prove these things from the record because the way that they were talked about at the time was so galling that the judges couldn't look any other way but directly at those words. But that's rare. That is so rare. And legislators are generally smart enough to avoid these kind of calamities.
And Jessica, how do you think this will play out in a partisan sense? Clearly, Democrats currently feel as though they have more to lose because there will be fewer Democratic districts being drawn up. And Republicans feel as though this could be a part of their ongoing redistricting attempts to maybe eke out a few extra House seats.
You know what? That's an interesting thing to point out because I actually think that if we sit with this for a while, Democrats might realize that they have more to gain here than they realize. I think there have been multiple instances over the last several years in which Democrats have attempted to draw majority minority districts, whether that's Latino voters or Hispanic voters or in some states Asian voters. And Republicans have objected to that because they say that they have done racial gerrymandering. Well, that's not an issue anymore. So if Republicans or Democrats want to gerrymander a specific area of town entirely based on race, all they have to do now is say, well, that's partisan, because we know that that group of people overwhelmingly votes for Democrats. So it removes that check for both parties. And I think the current environment in the United States is one in which we are all pretty sure that Republicans will take advantage of that, but things change in politics, and this is a permanent ruling. This is always how we're going to think about these voting rights cases unless Congress decides to pass a new law. And given the effectiveness of our Congress right now, I think that that's probably asking too much. And so we're stuck with this. And I think we'll just see how it plays out.
Jessica Huseman, thank you for being with us on Planet America.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
This month we say farewell to Stephen Colbert.
The network will be ending The Late Show in May.
So say hello to the new king of late night TV. It's Congress's favorite comedian, King Charles III.
Action.
He's topical.
250 years ago, or as we say in the United Kingdom, just the other day.
He's cheeky.
We have really everything in common with America nowadays, except, of course, language.
And most importantly, in this golden age of free speech, he's approved by Donald Trump.
Charles, look, young Charles, he's so cute.
And best of all, he's bringing a new studio band. Tune in for his first bombshell interview, Prince Harry. The Late Show with King Charles III of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and of his other realms and territories, King, head of the Commonwealth and defender of the faith. 11:35 Eastern, until cancelled by the FCC.
And that is it for another trip to Planet America. We'll see you back here in the Situation Room at the same time next week on ABC TV. Anytime you like on ABC iView, YouTube and Facebook.
And do not forget Pep, the Planet Extra podcast. We're going to have a brand new pod tomorrow with more on the Supreme Court, more on an abortion drugs case, and so much more. See you there. Bye-bye.